Why am I standing up? No, I'm not off my rocker, although literally, I am. I am standing up for this video because someone needs to stand up for the transgender community. I am but a small voice, but I am standing up, and I want you to stand up too.
You are an honorable man, Quill. I am Groot.
Now I'm standing. You all happy? We're all standing up now.
After you hear what I will play for you, I think you will see the need for all of us to stand up. Nancy Mace, representative from South Carolina and candidate for the governor of South Carolina, introduced an amendment to the National Defense Authorization Act, the NDAA, in which she attacked children. She attacked more than just children, but her primary attack was against children. Her secondary aim was to attack women, yet she was permitted to utter slurs on the House floor without challenge. It's time to challenge her. It's time to stand up. Let's have a chat. Hello and welcome. Thank you so much for joining me, and especially to my patrons and channel members. I've seen little coverage of this, and it's not surprising as it isn't a separate bill. It's an amendment to the National Defense Authorization Act, the NDAA, which dictates policies, budget, and expenditures for the Defense Department. It will pass in some form or other, or the military will have no budget. The only question is whether or not Mace's amendments will become part of military policy. Mace proposed 26 amendments to the NDAA, and 5 of them passed to the debate stage. The ban on gender-affirming care for military dependents was one of the 5. The bill must now pass the Republican-controlled Senate and will become law, barring a Democratic filibuster. One reason these amendments got so little attention in the news is minutes after they passed, Charlie Kirk was assassinated. Few news outlets even posted recordings of Mace's offensive speech, but I was able to obtain this one from Forbes.
Mr. Chair, this is the second of 5, only 5, and I think there should be more amendments regarding gender-affirming care, you name it.
7 seconds in, and she is already using a slur against the transgender community. Note that few members are even present. Her reference to 5 amendments is the amendments she proposed that specifically target the transgender community. And target is exactly the right word here. If her purpose was to support the armed forces, as she claims, she would not need to use a slur to refer to the transgender community. If her purpose was to protect children from harmful medical practices, she would not need to use a slur against the very people that she is trying to protect. No, she uses the slur because her aim is to attack. She is attacking the transgender community head-on and women indirectly. Let's hear what she wants.
Castration is not a mistake, by the way. My colleagues on the other side of the aisle want to say that castration is health care, and there's nothing more dehumanizing than going after the out there. One recently shot 2 young school children in Minnesota.
Slur number 2, and the characterization of gender-affirming care as being chemical castration. Let's see her back that claim. Will she? Next, she refers to the shooting in Minnesota. That was a terrible tragedy, and I do not condone violence in any form. I am a proponent of no personal gun ownership, but I know that that puts me into a small minority. Yes, a transgender person committed this atrocity. There have been 1,665 school shootings in America since 2001. That means that of the 1,665 school shootings, 2 were committed by a transgender person, or 0.12% of the school shootings were committed by transgender people. 0.1%. Ms. Mace, if you are in fact concerned about school shootings, why not target the 99.9% of the shooting perpetrators instead of the 0.1%? According to Homeland Defense Security, 98% of the school shooters were male. 56% of the school shooters were white. When the majority of school shooters are white males, why are you not targeting the source of the problem? White males. We all know the answer. Because Nancy Mace isn't interested in protecting school children. Nancy Mace is only interested in pushing a right-wing ideology onto those of us who do not accept it. Nancy Mace is in a culture war. She doesn't care who gets hurt by her agenda.
It is a mental illness, and it needs to stop, and we can stop it in our military right now.
This is the most bizarre and revealing claim of her speech. Being transgender is a mental illness. Okay, if that is the case, what do we do with people who are mentally ill? We get them medical care. We seek medical attention to address the illness if possible, and treat the problematic symptoms if treating the ailment is not possible. So what does Nancy Mace propose? This needs to stop, and we can stop it in our military right now. How, Miss Mace? How does one legislate away a mental illness? If what Miss Mace was proposing were possible, we could simply ban depression, ban autism, ban schizophrenia, and poof, they all disappear. They are illegal. Seeking care for these illnesses is illegal, and poof, the problems disappear. How could anyone be so naive as to think that one can legislate away a mental illness? The answer is she doesn't really think that being transgender is a mental illness. She knows that it isn't. If it was, the solution would be seeking the best medical care available to treat the illness. But she is doing the opposite. She wants to take away medical care from the transgender community. Why? Because she knows that being transgender is not a mental illness. It is not in the DSM-5. Gender dysphoria is a mental illness. Gender dysphoria, the significant distress a person experiences with their gender identity, their internal sense of self as male, female, a blend of both or neither, is at odds with the sex that they were assigned at birth. Not all transgender people experience gender dysphoria. Most of gender-affirming care is aimed at treating gender dysphoria. Ms. Mace cannot legislate away gender dysphoria. People who experience gender dysphoria will not stop experiencing distress just because medical help is made illegal. And gender dysphoria is not limited to transgender people. Gynecomastia is a condition of enlarged breasts in men. The treatment, gender-affirming care. The removal of the excess breast tissue. The removal of healthy breast tissue that does not align with one's sense of maleness. The famous Frank Turek had gynecomastia, and he had surgery to correct the condition. He has had gender-affirming surgery.
Have you ever heard of gynecomastia?
I had it.
And so did you have that fixed?
Yes, I did.
And did that make you feel affirmed in your gender?
I've had that myself and had it surgically removed when I was in the Navy. Yeah.
And do you feel more comfortable in your body and more affirmed in your gender because of that?
Well, it wasn't a gender thing for me. It was the fact, well, I can't even get into it now because it had nothing to do with my gender. Okay. So it had to do with the fact that it looked really odd.
Women who seek breast augmentation or reduction are seeking gender-affirming care. But Nancy Mace thinks that she can end gender dysphoria in the military by banning medical care to military dependents that suffer from this condition. If that were true, the transgender community would be seeking this legislation. They are not. Why do you suppose that is?
So this amendment, in last year's NDAA, we took the important step of banning TRICARE from covering medical interventions to treat gender dysphoria, which would result in the sterilization of children. This was a strong statement by the Congress in opposition to the mutilation of kids. However, the language allows the Department of War to continue to perform an array of gender-affirming child abuse on military dependents and to continue to mutilate our service members.
Mace again mischaracterizes what she is trying to do. She says they have already banned some gender-affirming care for military children. Last year's NDAA included a ban for gender-affirming care for children under 18 if the care could result in sterilization. So talk therapy was unaffected. Puberty blockers should not have been affected as they do not cause sterilization. But this bill is not aimed at children, despite what Ms. Mace is saying. Military dependence includes spouses. Because my husband was career military and is now retired, I am a dependent spouse under TRICARE. This amendment is aimed at me and all military spouses. The aim is to get a ban on gender-affirming care for adults. It is an attempt to strip bodily autonomy from military spouses. The bill aims to strip me of bodily autonomy. Mace says it applies only to surgery, or what she calls chemical mutilation. I have no idea what that is supposed to mean, but it would likely deny hormone treatment to military spouses. She says this is to apply to military members, but military members that are transgender have already been kicked out of the service. There are no warfighters that receive gender-affirming care. This bill is aimed at me and my fellow military spouses.
My amendment is simple. It would prohibit TRICARE across the board from covering or furnishing the chemical and surgical mutilation of our warfighters and their dependents under the guise of health care. Our government should not be in the business of mutilating our fellow citizens, particularly our warfighters, with our tax dollars, with your tax dollars.
If what Ms. Mace is saying were true, there should be medical data to support her position. The medical community would be opposed to such abuse, but she presents no evidence of medical abuse. She presents no evidence of how many people she is talking about. She presents no evidence to support her claim that gender-affirming care is harmful. She doesn't because she can't. Studies show that gender-affirming care works. It saves lives. If it didn't, the medical community would not be supporting it.
This does not serve to advance our national security. It serves only to advance a dangerous and radical ideology that the American people have soundly rejected.
She's not against a medically abusive procedure. She's against an ideology. She's wrong that Americans are with her. 59% of Americans support the rights of transgender adults to have gender-affirming care. The majority. Now, the numbers are lower for minors. It's only 43%. But that still is not an ideology that the American people have soundly rejected. The only reason bans on gender-affirming care for transgender youth are successful in some states is not enough people are willing to stand up for the transgender community.
Not only have the American people rejected the chemical and surgical mutilation of their fellow citizens, but much of the science doesn't support it as well.
Let's see her support that claim. The science is not on her side. If it were, the American Medical Association, the American Academy of Pediatrics, and the American Psychological Association would not all be standing together, opposed to the legislation that Ms. Mace proposes.
The science shows playing into the delusions of these individuals is not compassionate, it's cruel.
Then why, when people are affirmed in the gender of their choice, do they have suicide rates comparable to the rest of society? And when they do not receive care, they have a disproportionately high rate of suicide. What you propose would literally cause the deaths of many in the transgender community. Is that your real aim? Do you seek death for the transgender community? Is that how you propose to end gender dysphoria, by legislating away medical care in hopes of causing death? Even if you were right and the care caused chemical castration, is that not preferable to death?
Numerous studies have shown not only do these cross-sex hormones dramatically increase the risks of infertility and sexual dysfunction, they actually increase in depression, anxiety, and suicidal ideation among those who these medical procedures are performed.
Note again that she produces no studies to support her position. But here are some real medical studies. They show exactly the opposite of what Ms. Mace claims. Hormone therapy decreases depression, anxiety, and lowers suicide rates in those on which these procedures are performed. If that were not the case, the medical community would not be supporting this care. It would be a violation of their Hippocratic oaths.
The purpose of our military is to fight and to win wars. It is to create war fighters, killers, not to participate in the latest progressive fad.
And you have already booted out all service members who are transgender. Your proposed law will have no effect on warfighters. It will affect military spouses and children. Hormone therapy is not used until a child is about 16, after the child has been on puberty blockers for a few years. If the child still wishes to transition at about 16, he, she, or they can receive cross-hormone therapy to develop the secondary sex characteristics that align with their gender. Studies show this results in better mental health and quality of life outcomes.
Under the Biden administration, we diverted money away from readiness and lethality to promote extreme gender ideology and fund sex changes in our military. Under the Trump administration, we have finally recognized gender dysphoria for what it is, a mental illness which precludes military service.
If that were true, all people separated from the military for having gender dysphoria should be on medical disability. How many service members were put on medical disability for gender dysphoria? I'll tell you, 0. No one separated from the service was given a medical discharge and a rating for their disability. This was not treated as an illness. Had these service members been separated for any other illness, they would have gone before a medical board that would have determined their level of disability and given them a disability rating that would have entitled them to disabled veteran benefits. This is what is done for service members with medical disabilities, but this was not done. Despite your claim that this is a mental illness, these service members were not separated for a medical condition. They were separated for the good of the service, which is more akin to a disciplinary measure. You claim that they are ill and then punish them for being ill. How messed up is that? Either they are ill or they are not. There is no other option. If they are ill, give them the medical treatment they need. If they are not mentally ill, stop saying that they are.
Our armed services are not a laboratory to study the effects of irreversible surgeries or hormones. Our service does not exist to provide experimental treatments to those whose conditions should be disqualifying. These people are mentally ill and should not be serving in the United States military.
Again, there are no service members with this condition. You've kicked them all out. Second, these treatments are not experimental. They've been used for decades.
This amendment says clearly the purpose of our military is to defend the United States, not validate identity politics. It makes sure TRICARE serves the mission of protecting health, not undermining it. And I urge my colleagues to support this amendment, and I yield back, or reserve the balance of my time.
Gentlelady reserves. What person, the gentleman from Washington State, seek recognition?
Claim the time in opposition.
The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you. I yield myself 1 minute.
The gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
First of all, I want to thank the maker of this amendment for making it clear what the problem is. Mentally ill, insulting transgender people. This is exactly what these amendments are about. It's about a right-wing culture war to try to target the transgender community and make them something less than human. And if you listen to those comments, you get a feel for why that's a problem.
Thank you, Adam Smith. This isn't about protecting children. This isn't about service readiness. This is about a culture war to strip transgender people and women of bodily autonomy. Yes, it applies to all military spouses, men, women, and non-binary. 90% of military spouses are women. Because some gender-affirming care has already been banned for military children, this bill is primarily aimed at women.
Number two, this amendment doesn't have anything to do with transgender people serving in the military. Now, President Trump has already implemented that bigoted discriminatory policy to drive them out of the military. This is about health care for children experiencing gender dysphoria.
Thank you again, but you miss that it is aimed at all military dependents, spouses, as well as children.
And what this amendment does is it bans that health care treatment for children experiencing gender dysphoria. I've made a series of arguments on the other amendment about why that is such a bad idea, but the bottom line is this is a legitimate problem, And the studies have often shown that this is beneficial treatment that is now being denied by the United States Congress. This is something that doctors and patients should decide.
Yes, medical decisions should be made by the medical community, not Congress.
You know, if we wanted to offer an amendment saying, please look at this issue, here's some studies on one side or the other, ask the medical community to reach their conclusions, that's one thing. But banning it doesn't make sense. I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves.
The country has not gone completely bonkers. We need more Adam Smiths.
Gentlelady from South Carolina.
Mr. Chair, how much time is remaining?
2 minutes remaining.
Okay, thank you. If not wanting to castrate kids is right-wing culture war, sign me up, because this is not the kind of thing that should be happening to children or military dependents anywhere in our country. And castrating kids, it's not health care either. We're talking about something very permanent. We don't allow our kids to be tattooed until they're adults. We don't allow them to drink or smoke or vote until they're adults. But you're saying that it's okay to castrate a kid because of this weirdo freak ideology. Yes, these are weirdos, these are freaks, these are people who are mentally deranged, mentally ill, and this should not be funded by American taxpayers. Thank you, and I yield the balance of my time.
More name calling. Now imagine for a moment that Ms. Mace were right. Suppose the medical community was treating developmentally disabled children with a treatment that Ms. Mace didn't like. Imagine her coming to the House floor and referring to developmentally disabled children using the R word. Imagine her calling developmentally disabled children weirdos, freaks, or deranged. Imagine her calling developmentally disabled children weirdos, freaks, or deranged. This would not be tolerated. The sergeant at arms should be calling Miss Mace to order. Miss Mace's colleagues should be seeking to censure her for this verbal attack that is a violation of House decorum. If personal attacks against the transgender community are to be tolerated on the House floor, what's next? Racial slurs? Why was this speech allowed unchallenged by the majority of those present? Shame on you. This is disgraceful conduct, and shame on those that sat there and did nothing to oppose it. Stand up.
Gentlelady yields the balance of her time. Gentleman from Washington State is recognized.
Current law bans sterilization. So that's just a lot of crap about what this is about. Current law bans what she's talking about. What is being banned here is any treatment for gender dysphoria, and that is completely wrong. With that, I yield 2 minutes to the gentlewoman from California, Ms. Jacobs.
Thank you again, Adam Smith. Thank you for exposing the hypocrisy of this amendment. What I cannot tell from this amendment is whether it bans counseling. The way it is worded is so vague that it might. If counseling is banned for the mentally ill, what the hell are they supposed to do? Heal themselves? Are you going to pass out magic wands for this?
The gentlelady from California is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Ranking Member. So as you all know, President Trump has already kicked out transgender troops from the military, despite the fact that they are willing and able to serve, and despite the fact that it will cost billions of dollars and decades to recruit and train their replacements. So this proposed ban on medical care is unnecessary and redundant for our service members, because we know the goal here isn't actually about policy. It's a symbolic punishment. It's to send a false political message that trans healthcare is illegitimate, even though those of us who live in reality know that trans healthcare is safe, effective, and medically necessary.
Thank you, Sarah Jacobs. Those of us who live in reality. Exactly. In reality, the transgender community needs gender-affirming care. Only in a fantasy world can one think that no one will be transgender if you just ban transgender-affirming care. Like I said, to make this work, you need to pass out magic wands.
It is supported by every major medical association in the U.S., representing more than 1.3 million U.S. doctors. And let's be clear by what we mean about gender-affirming care. We don't only mean surgery. Sometimes it's just using the correct pronouns. Sometimes it's mental health care. Sometimes it's hormone therapy. And yes, sometimes it's surgery. This ban would also take away mental health care from the trans children of our service members. We know that trans youth face significant mental health challenges, not because they're trans, to be clear, but because of the external factors they face, like social isolation, discrimination, lack of affirmation, the stress of not getting the care they need, having to hear colleagues of mine say horrible things about them on the House floor. And like any parent, if a service member's child can't get the care they need, they will be distracted from their mission.
Good point. I didn't think of that. Further, you are likely to lose more service members who now need to leave to get insurance elsewhere that will cover their child's needs. And don't forget the spouses. This bill also bans gender-affirming care for spouses.
So ultimately, this ban will hurt our military readiness and likely lead service members to leave the military.
I guess I got a bit ahead of myself. Thank you, Sarah.
This amendment isn't only bigoted, it's short-sighted and would hurt our national security. So I urge my colleagues to oppose this amendment, and I yield back.
Bravo, Sarah. Sarah is standing up.
I rise today in strong opposition to this amendment. If passed, this amendment would immediately prohibit TRICARE coverage of mental health counseling for transgender young people.
Becca Ballant of Vermont has now clarified for me that yes, this bill bans counseling. How bizarre is that? You claim that being transgender is a mental illness and then ban mental health care for the illness. That's like declaring cancer to be an illness and then banning medical treatment for cancer. In what world does that make sense?
Let me repeat that. This amendment would take away mental health care services for transgender kids of service members. That's what we're talking about. This amendment is intentionally discriminatory and result in higher rates of mental health issues and suicide for trans youth.
Why do they keep forgetting spouses? That's exactly what this bill is intended for. It couches a ban on health care for transgender youth, but it also bans health care for transgender adults, too. This will be a federal stripping of bodily autonomy from military spouses. The government is telling military spouses what they can and cannot do with their own bodies medically, what medical care they can and cannot have, not based on medical diagnosis or approved standards of care, but no, based on conservative ideology of what women ought not do with their bodies.
Kids who already experience higher rates of depression and anxiety and suicide compared to their peers. Republicans' all-out assault on health care right now has put these people into a state of constant fear and anxiety.
She's right, and on top of that is the fear of going to school. I didn't have to live with that. We did have a wave of bomb threats. When they came, we got to go home from school early. But eventually they caught the guy doing it and the bomb threats stopped. The motivation was to get us out of school early. No one was ever hurt and there was never a real bomb. But I never had to live with the anxiety of a school shooter. Being a kid right now is tough.
Imagine that you're a service member, you're a parent, and you hear from a doctor that Congress has banned medically necessary care endorsed by every major medical association that would literally help save your child's life. All young people in this country should have access to the mental health care that they need. Full stop.
Thank you, Becca. Becca is standing up.
Forcing service members to choose between being able to provide health care for their family, for their kids, or serving their country does not make our military stronger, does not make our country safer, and it will not, no matter what the member says, it will not make transgender people in this country disappear. I urge my colleagues to vote no.
And Becca has hit the nail on the head. The aim of this bill is to make the transgender community disappear. Why does Miss Mace seek their deaths? I don't know. It's possible she is too ignorant to understand what she is doing. If she does understand, then she is evil. Only an evil person wishes the obliteration of a people group. And even if the problem is ignorance, the result is the same: the attempt to obliterate my friends. I will not sit by and let this happen. I am standing opposed. It's time to stand up for the transgender community. It's time to stand up for civility on the House floor. It's time to stand up for children. It's time to stand up for bodily autonomy. It's time to stand up for women's rights. And it's time to tell Nancy Mace to sit down. Live your life. Few news outlets. The famous Frank Turek had gynecomastia.